For this one, 0.3x equals 9. What should you have done here to solve for x? Divide both sides by 0.3. So in your calculators, you would say 9 first, then you would hit your division, and then you would put a decimal in and 3. And you should have gotten 30 there, okay? 30 there. All right, let's look at the next one. What should we have done here? Divide by 60, right? So you're going to divide both sides by 60. And since we're using a calculator, it would have given you a decimal. Divided by 60. You should have gotten 0.25, 1/4 there. 0.25. And then for this last one, your x is already by itself. So you really just needed to multiply these two in your calculators. You would have put your decimal, 1, 2. You'd have used your multiplication in your calculator, and then times 800, and you would get 96 there. All right, so the first thing we see here in our books is the definition of a percent. A percent is a ratio of a number to 100. The symbol for percent looks like that, which hopefully you're all familiar with. Okay, so we've talked about what a ratio is. A ratio is comparing one number to another. And specifically for percent, it is comparing the number to 100. The number to 100. That's what we're comparing it to for this ratio. All right, so then percents can be expressed with the symbol, just like they have here, the percentage symbol, which we're familiar with, like 40%. You can also express it as a fraction. That 40 would go over 100. So if it is a percent, whatever percent it is, that whole thing goes over 100. If you reduce it, it can be 2/5, right, as a fraction there. Or it can also be represented as a decimal. To find the decimal, you literally just do the division. 2 divided by 5 is 0.4. And so there are 3 different ways to represent the same thing. 40% could be written just like that, 40%. You could write it as 2/5, or you can write it as 0.4. 0.4. All right? Now to get then, so let's say we want to go from one to the other, then we are just going to do those things. We're going to take the percentage, put it over 100 if we want a fraction. We're going to use division if we want a decimal. So let's look at these examples right here on this page. The first example says write 82% as a fraction and as a decimal. All right? So we're going to write it as a fraction first. If they've given us 82%, we're going to take the 82 and we're going to put it over 100. Now, because I'm doing a fraction, do you think I want to leave it that way? No, I need to look for something that's in common. This is easy because they're both even. So what's in common here? 2. Divide top and bottom by 2. And so as a fraction, this guy is going to be 41 over 50. That's as small as you can get it, all right? That will not reduce anymore. So that is my fraction. Now, if I want it in decimal form, I could divide there, right? However, when you have been given the percentage piece of it, there's another way to get it in decimal form. What is it? So if I have a fraction and I want it in decimal form, the only way really to do that is to divide. But they gave me the percentage. And so if they give you the percentage, you take wherever the decimal is. In this case, the decimal is at the end here because I don't see a decimal at all. So my decimal is right here. To change it from a percent to a decimal, I move it 2 places to the left, all right? So I'm going to go this place over 1, 2. So as a decimal, that's going to be 0.82. And if you were to put into your calculators 41 divided by 50, you would get 0.82. That is the same thing, all right? So if they gave it to you in decimal form, in percentage form, just move your decimal to get it in decimal form. Don't do your division from a fraction. You're going about it the hard way. All right? Let's look at the next example. Write 3/5 as a decimal and as a percent. All right? And as a percent. So in this case, they didn't give us the percent. So we are going to take that fraction and we are going to divide. So in this section, we're using calculators, but we have 3 divided by 5. When you do that in your calculator, you should get 0.6. 0.6, all right? So that's the first part of this. We have it as a decimal. And now they want it as a percentage. So when we went from percent to decimal, we moved it 2 places to the left. Now we're going from decimal to percent. So how are we going to move it this time? Right, so I'm going to take this decimal and I'm going to move it 2 places to the right. If I have an empty spot, which I do, I fill it in with a 0. So that goes to 60%. Another way to do it is to multiply by 100. That's really all we're doing. So if you take your decimal and you multiply by 100, you're going to get that. If you take your percentage and you divide by 100, you would get that. It is the same thing. Dividing by 100 moves it 2 places to the left. Multiplying it by 100 moves it 2 places to the right. All right? Last example before we do some of these. Write 1.55 as a percent and as a fraction. So now they've given us the decimal. All right, so they gave us percent and they wanted it the 2 other ways. They gave us fraction, they wanted it the 2 other ways. And now they're giving us decimal and they want it the 2 other ways. So the first thing is it's really easy to change this to a percentage. We have the decimal, and just like in the example above, I can just move my decimal or multiply by 100. It is the same thing. And so I can move it 2 places to the right, and I'm going to get 155%. Yes, percentages can be greater than 100, all right? 155%. Now they want this as a fraction. We already have the percentage. We're going to do exactly what we did in the first example. We're going to take this 155%, and it is always compared to what denominator? Percentage always is over what? Over 100, all right? And just like in the other example, we don't want to leave it like this. What goes into 155 and into 100? Yeah, 5 goes into both of those. All right, so 100 divided by 5, that's easy. Yeah, so we're going to say 5 into 15 is 3. 5 into 5 is 1. So 31 over 20 is my fraction, and 155% is my percentage. So 187, they gave it to in percentage, so we're going to give it to decimal and fraction form. For decimal, you can just move it over 2 places. For fraction, you can just put it over 100. So you have 1.87 and 187 over 100. For the second one, they gave it to us in decimal form. So they want it then in percentage and in fraction. So for percentage, you can just move it over 2 places. For fraction, you can just put it over 100. For the last one, you should have divided. So you should have done 3 divided by 5. When you do that, you would get your decimal form as 0.6, and then you can just move that decimal 2 places to the right to get 60%. Here, it says the percentage equation. So the percent of the whole is equal to the part. So you have the percent, and you're multiplying that times the whole, all right? So whatever percent they give you, you're multiplying that by the whole, and that's going to equal the part that you're solving for. And so there's a couple ways to do this. You can do it as an equation, and you can do it as ratios, all right? So the first way they showed us was this equation. We have this equation, percent times the whole equals the part. Another way you can do that is you can say the percent over 100 always equals the part over the whole. 2 ways to do these problems, all right? You can do an equation, percent times whole equals part, or you can do 2 ratios, all right? Percent over 100 equals part over whole, all right? Now, when you do it as an equation, everything has to be in decimal form, all right? So your percent has to be in decimal form. When you do it as a ratio, then your percent needs to be in fraction form, all right? So it just depends on how you set this up as to how you're going to do this. Now, you could put it in fraction form for the other piece of it if you want to, but typically it's done in decimal form there. You cannot leave it, however, with a percentage in it either way, all right? So you can't multiply or divide by something that has the percentage sign in it. It needs to either be in decimal form or in fraction form to actually do the number crunching of it. So let's look at the first one. It says, what percent of 85 is 17? Okay, so the percent times the whole equals the part. So we're going to say the percent. Do we know the percent? Do we know it? No. So what are we going to put when we don't know something in an algebra equation? A variable. So x times the whole, which is 85, equals the part. So anywhere you see an of, if you see an of, that means multiplication. All right, so of always means multiplication. This is always going to be multiplication here. If you see an is, just like in our other things that we've done, is always means equals. All right, so then how do I solve this? What's happening between the x and the 85? Multiplication. So what do I need to do to get rid of it? Divide. All right, divide. So in your calculators, do 17 divided by 85. You should get 0.2. Now they said what percent? Is that in percent form? What form is that in? That's in decimal. I need to change it. How do I change it? Multiply by 100 or move that over 2 places to the right. So that's going to be 20%. 20%. All right? Does that make sense? Good. All right, so let's look at this. If I were to do this the other way in ratios. Percent over 100. Do I know percent? For this equation right here, did I know it at the beginning? No. So I would say x over 100 equals, what was the part? What was the part in this? Percent times whole equals part. Which is the part? 17. And what was the whole? 85. Just a little note. Of will always be in front of the whole. Always. Of what? The whole. Okay? So do we know how we could solve this guy? Cross multiplication. And so if you were to do cross multiplication here, you would actually get 20. You would get 85 times x equals 1700, and you would get 20 there. All right, so whether you set it up as an equation with a decimal, or if you set it up as 2 equivalent fractions, you will get the same exact answer. All right, let's look at the next one. Example 2. What is 45% of 236? All right, so let's label these as parts and wholes. All right, so this is obviously my percentage, right? Which is my whole and which is my part? Which is my whole? Yeah, it always comes after the of. So this guy right here is my whole piece. So that means what is my part? Variable. Correct. And so x is always equals, all right? 45%. Remember, I cannot multiply if it's in percentage. I need to change that to decimal. What is 45% as a decimal? 0.45. And then of. What is of? That is multiplication. So we're going to, and I'm actually going to do this so that we don't confuse decimals and multiplication. And then I'm going to put my whole there, 236. Now my x is already on the one side of the equation by itself. So how do I solve for x? I just multiply. 0.45 times 236, what am I going to get there? Yeah, I'm going to get 106.2. And that is my answer. Okay. All right, last example, then y'all are going to try some. All right, 78 is 130% of what number? 78 is 130% of what number? Okay, so it's easy to find my percent here, right? Got that? Which one is the whole?
Variable.
The variable is the whole. What number? What number is the whole? Remember, the whole always comes after the word of, right? So that leaves only one piece to be my part. What is the part? 78 is the part. All right? Remember, the part is going to be equal to the percentage times the whole. So I have 78 is equals. How do I write 130% as a decimal? 1.3. And you can leave off the 0 when it is after the decimal place, by the way. Of means multiplication. So times x. All right? What is happening between the 1.3 and the x? Multiplication. So I need to divide. In your calculators, if you do 78 divided by 1.3, you should get that x equals 60. Now, if you set this up, I'm going to do the ratio again because some people really take to the ratios. For the ratio, my percent always goes over 100, okay? So for this one, I would say 130 over 100. Yes, percent always goes over 100. That equals my part. We said the part was 78 over the whole. We do not know. If you did cross multiplication there, you would get 60, okay? You would get 60. You can solve these either way, by equations or by ratios. In equations, you want to put your percentage in a decimal. In ratios, your percentage needs to be in a fraction over 100. All right, so I want you to identify your percentage, your part, or your whole, and then set up either an equation or a ratio and solve. How many gallons of 2% milk does it take to yield 1 gallon of butterfat? All right, 2% milk. 2%. This is how this is written. 2% of the milk is butterfat. All right. 2% of the milk is butterfat. How much specifically butterfat do we want? 1 or 1 gallon, yes. So 1. So this is written just like this. 2% is of the milk is butterfat. Do we know how much milk? No. So, and there needs to be an L in milk. That'd be great. So do we know the milk? What do we put for the milk? Yeah, we put a variable. So this is the percentage, 0.02, move it over 2 places, of the milk, or of the whole, X, is the butterfat, which is 1. Right? So even in a word problem, they're just asking you 2% is, or 1 is 2% of how much, basically, is what they're saying. So my part then is going to be the 1. My whole is going to be the milk. And that's going to equal the percentage over 100. All right, so how do I solve this guy? Just divide both sides by 0.02, right? 0.02. Pay attention, by the way. 2% and 20% are different, okay? So a lot of times you'll get 2% and I'll see people put it as 0.2. Remember, that does have to go over 2 decimal places. Okay, 2 decimal places. So divide both sides by your 0.2. And you should get 50. So 50 gallons of milk. Miss Grandy received 17,490 of the 31,800 votes. What percent of the votes did she receive? What is the part? What is the part? 17,490 is the part. What is the whole? 31,000. What is the percentage? We don't know. It is always the percent times the whole equals the part. Always. The percent over 100 equals the part over the whole. All right? And so either way, you're going to get 55%.